Hello, dear listener. My name is Rose, and I am the writer, director, etc./general creator of this podcast audio drama thing. Sorry about the delay in getting these episodes out. Thank you so much for all your kind patience and support. I would like to welcome you to our 5th season of the Wessex dramas with an adaptation of Thomas Hardy's novel, The Trumpet Major. As with our last few stories, this is of course a romance story with some light-hearted bits. Our heroine Anne has to choose from 3 different suitors of 3 varying levels of suitableness, all while King George and his entire court comes to their small town of Weymouth to survey the possible invasion of Napoleon, as you do. So pop on your mob cap, loosen your stays, and vaguely curse at the French, and let's sit down to watch the unfortunate attempts at young romance to blossom.
Encampment Day. The party are conducted along a row of tents. The party are shown a line of horses at picket. The party are shown the wives' temporary huts, built from hurdles, clods, and sometimes a bit of thatch. Encampment outside of mess house. Day. As the party come around the corner to be shown the wooden mess house, they see 3 dashing hussars being shown a horse by a big man in yeoman's costume, whom Mrs. Garland's party see from behind. Cripplestraw is walking the horse offered for sale up and down. The big soldier, who is the proposing horse vendor, Festus, sees the party and greets the miller and Mrs. Garland. He then addresses Anne.
Are you offended with me?
No.
Then when are you coming to the hall again?
Mrs. Garland ambles over to join in, and she smiles at Festus.
Probably never.
Nonsense, Anne. You can go any time.
Let her come now, Mrs. Garland. I would be glad to escort her.
Thank you, but I shall not come. I'm viewing the camp, as you see.
Anne's mother gently takes hold of Anne's arm and starts, under her breath, to remonstrate with Anne.
Leave her alone. Leave her alone. Now I think of it, I'm glad that she can't come, as I'm already engaged.
Anne hurries away, followed by her party. Encampment, declining hill path, day. Mrs. Garland is walking with Anne and John. She addresses John.
John, do you know where your father is?
Father's behind, Miss Garland.
Mrs. Garland looks up behind her and sees the miller beckoning to her. She walks a little way up the hill to join him, and the older couple walk quite slowly, dropping behind the younger couple. Mrs. Garland and the miller seem earnestly to be discussing something. Mrs. Garland then leaves the miller and hurries up to join the younger couple, just as they hit the lane where stands the mill house.
Well, I'm afraid that I must leave for you for now, for my duties. Ladies?
Yes. You must be off, John, but we must say thank you for a very interesting afternoon. Don't you think, Anne?
Anne smiles.
Yes, thank you, John. It was very interesting. Your horses were beautifully kept.
John removes his shako and bows low to the ladies. They curtsy back, and he walks smartly away as they turn and walk the remaining yards to the mill.
Child, don't worry about Festus if you mean to encourage John Loveday. I want you to see you're happy, and the Lovedays are our best friends.
What a weathercock you are, Mother! Why the change of heart?
Her mother leans in, confidentially, and takes her daughter's arm.
Mr. Loveday has just asked me to marry him, and I'm just considering.
Anne kisses her mother.
What a piece of news! Lovely! And are you to accept him, Mamma?
I think I probably will.
She smiles and kisses her mother again. They go in at their gate. Overcombe, day. Anne and her mother are shopping on the high street, with Anne carrying their basket of goods. The miller is hurrying along towards them, carrying some big planks of wood. When he looks up, sees them, and smiles.
Good morning, ladies, good morning.
He bows and juggles the planks, and they curtsy.
Hast thee heard? The Kings are coming very late tomorrow night, and our John is to take me to the top of a ridgeway over which the King's party must pass. John and I like the pleasure of your company, if you think you might be interested, ladies.
The miller smiles encouragingly at the ladies, generally and a bit spoonily at Mrs. Garland in particular.
Oh, that would be nice. Yes, please, Mr. Loveday. Don't you think that will be fun, Anne?
But if you excuse me, Mr. Loveday, I shan't come, as I will be sure to catch a cold.
Well, we shall call on ye after dinner, ladies. And do you see how you feel, Miss Anne? Please excuse me, but Davy be a-waiting for this wood.
He bows again and hurries away. There is the sound of trotting horses and jingling harness just behind them, and the ladies turn around to see 4 soldiers passing them. One soldier pulls up for a few seconds. It is Festus. He addresses Anne and her mother.
Good day, ladies. If you will, I propose to give myself the pleasure of calling on you tomorrow evening in order to escort you from the top of the ridgeway to see the king arrive.
Thank you, but our neighbour, Mr. Loveday, is already escorting us, Mr. Derryman.
Festus scowls.
Ah, he is he? Well, don't say I didn't offer, ladies. Good day.
He sniffs and trots smartly off to join his comrades.
Changed your mind, dear?
Anne gurns ruefully. The ridgeway, a track. Night. Mrs. Garland is walking a little ahead with John in the moonlight. The miller is walking ahead of them to make out the path. Anne is deliberately lingering behind.
Mrs. Garland, if it is acceptable to you, I would like your permission to pay my court to your daughter.
Oh, John, I should be very happy for you to do this. But I'm not too sure of the outcome. It is up to Anne herself, and she can be very self-opinionated, you know.
Well, thank you for your permission, Mrs. Garland. I shall brave the outcome, however.
He smiles at her.
Then I'll just go up and have a word with your father, John.
She smiles and hurries after the miller up the track. John drops back and waits for Anne, then joins her.
I'm glad you changed your mind and decided to join us, Miss Anne.
Oh, that was because of Festus.
Ah.
I mean, I sought to avoid his company.
Well, it's encouraging that you prefer mine to his. Because I was wondering, if you would allow me to pay court to you, you know, call on you, if that's all...
Oh, I don't think my mother would like it.
Your mother has already given me her permission.
But I don't want any walking out or any such.
Well, it wouldn't be any sort of commitment, but one day, you know, you might not think me too bad. And my situation will improve. My father has asked me to come into the business with him, so we could live right next to your mother.
Oh. No, I don't think so.
We could live somewhere else, then.
No, I mean that I don't wish to be courted in the first place, Mr. Loveday. I thank you all the same for your kindness, but no, thank you.
Top of Ridgeway, night. They are nearing the top of the ridgeway, and the dawn is just beginning to crack. John and Anne look up and perceive that the miller and Mrs. Garland appear to be deep in earnest conversation, in which Anne and John don't feel that they can join. Anne walks away from John and stands looking down into the misty valley, nearest to her mother. John stands on the other side of his father, a little away from him. The mist and gloom of the morning suddenly lifts, and they see some German outrider soldiers carrying torches emerging from the mist, followed by 3 old leather carriages creaking along. Some equerries follow in the rear, also on horseback. There are some huzzas from a couple of knots on other onlookers along the ridge. Mrs. Garland addresses Anne as the procession passes.
Thank God, I have seen my king.
As the carriages vanish off around the valley corner, an old man, just standing further off with his son, addresses the Lovedays and Garlands.
I don't know what all the fantod were upon for a few footing old carriages. Standing gating here, this time of night, like a pile of galley crows. I'd be like to catch my death of cold. 'Tweren't worth it at all.
He sighs, shakes his head at the Lovedays and Garlands, and walks away, followed by his son. Our party watches him go, and then turns back to look at the view. The mist starts to lift from the sea, which our party can just see from where they stand. The sun suddenly bursts over the horizon magnificently. There is the sudden boom of cannon, followed by all the church bells in the neighbourhood sounding a welcome for the king.
Ah, now he's arrived. King George has come to Budmouth.
They smile at him and turn to descend. The miller goes first and offers his hand to Mrs. Garland as she steps gingerly from one rock to another on the path. She gratefully accepts it.
Now, don't you forget, ladies, that it is the King's review of his troops tomorrow morn, so I will call for ye again.
He calls back to John.
The review, John! What o'clock be that?
The review starts at 10 o'clock, Father, but we must be ahead of the royal party arriving.
Yes. I'll be with ye at 9 tomorrow then, Mrs. Garland, and we'll walk up on the Ridgeway again.
Thank you, neighbour.
They walk off down the hill, Anne in front with her mother, and John and the miller bringing up the rear.
Did you accept him, Mother?
I did, my love.
Anne leans over and kisses her mother.
Congratulations, Mother. I'm sure you'll be very happy with Mr. Loveday.
Mrs. Garland smiles.
I'm sure we both will.
Overcombe Downs, day. Anne, her mother, and the miller make their way up the hill, along with the other villagers. The miller then places the ladies upon a sort of cairn, so that they can see easily. There are various excited knots of villagers around them. Down below, they can see the beginning of a file of soldiers off to one side. They see the arrival of the royal party consisting of 4 equerries, and then the king, on horseback, with his brothers, the Dukes of Cambridge and Cumberland. The king is followed by 2 coachloads of his wife and 5 daughters in splendid costumes. Mrs. Garland tugs at Anne's arm at various times and draws her attention to the royal party.
Now you can see his feather. Oh, there's her hat. Oh, there's Her Majesty's India muslin shawl.
A tradesman with a broad-brimmed hat approaches the miller.
Miller, there's been a letter waiting for you for the last 3 days. If we'd known as I used to see you here, we'd have brought it along.
Ah, thank you for this. I would find someone as is a-going that way to collect it for me.
The tradesman tips his hat and moves off.
The soldiers have started moving.
Several buglers call, and then the soldiers start to file past the royal party. There are many thousands of them, and they march and ride along, saluting the king as they pass.
Isn't it marvellous? They're so brave.
I wonder who that letter is from.
It's probably from Bob, your other son, Mr. Loveday.
No. He wrote as his ship were off for foreign parts only a couple of months ago.
Across the file of soldiers is a young man in his late 20s, in a sailor's blue jacket, white trousers, a very handsome tanned face with blonde hair. He scans the assembled people, but doesn't seem to find who he seeks. The last of the soldiers pass, and the royal party, below, seem to be consulting about departing.
I'll just go and find someone to collect my letter, ladies, and I'll come back for you.
No. We'll just step down and get lunch on, Mr. Loveday. Please don't bother yourself about collecting us. Thank you for your company.
She smiles. The miller bows and flourishes his hat.
Then I'll see ye later, ladies.
He walks off, and the ladies turn away. Anne and her mother walk along the down and start to descend. They are descending almost onto the rump of the king's horse carrying its owner, which is carved into the hillside. Front of mill, day. In the afternoon, Anne is standing at her front door looking at the weather. John arrives and steps into his father's front path. He pauses when he sees Anne.
I saw you, Miss Garland.
Where was I?
On the top of the big mound, to the right of the king.
I saw you lots of times.
Did you really take the trouble to spot me? It's very good of you.
A casement window opens from above, and Mrs. Garland pokes out her head.
Her eyes followed you everywhere.
I looked at the dragoons. No more.
John is a little cast down by her coldness, and then the front door opens and the miller steps out.
Ah, John. I've a letter awaiting for me at Budmouth.
I'll collect it for you, Father. Perhaps Miss Garland would like to see what's happening there today. It's like a huge fair.
Anne looks uninterested and looks her dissent with a slow, awkward shrug.
You can drive in my gig. 'Twill do Blossom good.
David could drive her. I'd just as soon walk.
Anne smiles and nods her change of heart.
Get thee glad rags on then, missy, and I'll tell David to harness up the gig.
Anne smiles and vanishes inside.
I'll escort her, Father.
Aye, you do that, lad. The town'll be all a faddle.
John rides off. Esplanade, day. Budmouth is very busy as Anne is driven into the centre by David. Anne arrives outside of a public house, near to where the king is sitting with some of his generals on the esplanade. Several of his soldiers are marching past him and saluting. The king occasionally nods in response whilst talking to his generals. Anne turns to find John standing next to her. She smiles.
Trumpet Major! I didn't see you. Are you all afraid that Bonaparte will carry off our king?
Well, he is anxious to fight Boney single-handedly.
What a good, brave king.
Will you let me take you to the window, where you can see the Queen and some of the princesses?
Anne nods and turns to David.
Please will you wait here, David? I shall be back shortly.
She takes John's proffered arm and they walk away chatting. Gloucester Lodge. They arrive at the window of Gloucester Lodge and watch for signs of the royal ladies.
Have you thought of the other thing I asked you?
We won't speak of it.
You don't dislike me?
Oh, no! I just don't love you, you know? Like a wife should. Oh, what a pretty chip hat!
You think I am not worthy of the daughter of a genteel professional man?
Ah, there are the Queen and the princesses at the window.
The royals give a wave and the small crowd goes mad waving back, including Anne.
Oh, your mother did say.
Yes, that's the worst of it. Let's go back to David now, Mr. Loveday, if you don't mind.
She sets off around the building. Esplanade, public house, day. Anne discovers that David isn't there, outside of the pub, where she left him. She turns to John.
Oh! Where is he?
Probably inside.
Would you fetch him, please?
John bows and goes inside. People throng past the pub. And there is the sound of a brass band playing for the king. Anne is suddenly aware of a small Sweet William flower head lying on the floor. She picks it up and sniffs it. Anne then hears a scuffle at an upstairs window, looks up and sees Festus and two other soldiers waving and grinning. Festus minds that he threw the flower. Anne, twirling the flower in her hand, looks away, and they sees John approaching. He looks interrogatively at the flower, so Anne shrugs and gives it to him. John looks enraptured, opens his wallet, and carefully puts it in.
I didn't mean, I just found it. Where's David?
I can't find him. Never mind, I'll drive you home. I must just call at the post office for Father's letter first. It's bound to be Bob come back, I think.
That was an episode of The Trumpet Major, written by Thomas Hardy and adapted by me and my co-writer Anne-Marie Goldthorp. I would like to thank our new editor for this episode, Milagros Guemes. I would also like to thank our amazing cast, Mark Lucas, Oliver Hickey, Stefan Marshall, Izzy Lucas, Mike Staddon, Caro Joy, Dan Almond, Neil Highley, John Simpson, John Seal, Peter Allison, Alban O'Brien, and Peter Melstock. You can find us on YouTube under Rose Goldthorp Films. We're on Spotify, Google, and the Apple Podcast, although that seems to be changing at the moment, so I'll keep you updated on that. The Thomas Hardy Society website and also the Wessex Dramas website. If you want more updates on what's happening with our podcast, follow Rose Goldthorp on Instagram or Facebook or sign up for our newsletter. Thank you again so much for your hard work, support, and kindness, and see you next time.